And just a quick, I know some of you have been to DevOps Days events before, but just while we get started, let's do a quick thank you to the organisers and people who are volunteering to help this event. So thank you very much for doing this one. All right, as Kevin said, my name's Martin Woodward, Martin Woo at Microsoft.com or at Martin Woodward. If you want to send me some abuse on Twitter, it's more than welcome. You can join the queue. I work on DevOps for Azure, so our cloud provider, and I work on a suite of DevOps tools that we have in there to help with your team. So I mostly at the minute work on a thing called pipelines and boards, so doing continuous deployment and things like that. But then we have a bunch of other services as well. And I even have that on timer, so the obligatory advert doesn't stay on for too long. There we go, all gone. I joined Microsoft in November 2009 from a cheeky little startup company, and Microsoft came along and bought us, which was very exciting times. I still have the same mortgage I had back then, so I didn't quite do the same deal that GitHub had, sorry, but there we go. And when I joined the company, I wasn't sure how long I was going to last, if I'm honest. I was coming from a startup culture. I was working on Java Eclipse tooling. I was like, what's this, what's Microsoft going to have for me? But we'll see how it goes. And luckily, I've been very lucky when I joined the company in that the company's moved closer to how I like to work rather than me having to move closer to them. So it's been a fantastic journey. And it's been a journey that's involved moving from a shrink-wrap product, a thing called Microsoft Team Foundation Server. I don't know if anybody knows that, a few nods of heads, to which actually shipped on a DVD. My first course when I joined the company was to be able to approve the hologram that got put onto the DVD that we shipped our software on. I'm like, wow, this is so different to how I'm used to working. And then we've gone there from shipping software on DVDs to actually delivering an always-on online service. And we've had to move the team there. We went first through an agile transformation and then more into some DevOps sort of techniques and strategies. When I joined, as I say, this org chart came out as from Manu Cornet, who works at Google, funnily enough. And it's all the different sort of org charts of all the companies in Silicon Valley. And this one felt very familiar to me when I joined it. So now I would say it's not like Oracle's where you've got legal and technical. The only people Microsoft lawyers are afraid of are Oracle's lawyers, which is interesting because there's more of them. But Microsoft, yeah, that's very much how it felt when I joined, and very recognizable to me. It's a different company today, as you all know, and a lot of that's down to our new CEO, a guy called Satya Nadella, who's awesome. And I knew him before he was a CEO. He doesn't talk to me anymore, but he waved to me. He literally waved to me the day he became CEO, and that's the last time I've spoken to him. So. But one of the things he did when he came into the company was he wanted very much to invest in our internal engineering tooling in the company. All of these different divisions had their own ways of building things, and he wanted to make it so we had a single engineering system that the whole company used. And crazily enough, let's use the same things we ship to our customers. That wasn't the case up until then. So that's what we do now. The thing I work on, so Azure repos and Azure pipelines, things like that, we have around about 90,000 users just inside Microsoft. So somebody had a question earlier on for Paul about how do we measure, impact and things. It's quite easy when you have 90,000 users inside your own company using your product, because if you're down for a minute, that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So people get very shouty very quickly. So disaster and planning for disaster isn't tricky to justify, and that's the case. We went from shipping every 2 to 3 years to right now we're shipping about 78,000 times a day. That's using DevOps practices and DevOps techniques. I say shipping, deploying is a very much, these are vanity statistics, okay, just to make it look cool and make you shake your head and take pictures of them. That's awesome. It's like deploying to, staging environments as well as deploying to production and things like that. But it's a lot of deployments. And you can't do that if you're if you're doing it manually all the time, or if you're X-copying things or SSHing things around all the time. It has to be automated to be able to do that. Yet another definition of DevOps slide. I think this is the third one we've got up today, so I'll put mine up quicker. People, process, products is what I like to say, because coming from a company that sell products, you assume I'm going to say that DevOps is what my product does, and it isn't. DevOps is about, in this order, okay, people, and the people are the hardest bit, the processes to support those people, and then the products to support the processes that support those people, okay? And the products are the very, very easiest part. You can buy them from us, you can buy them from other people, you can assemble them from open source, you can write your own. But it's about delivering value to your end users, and that's going to be one of the key habits we talk about. Right, here are some habits. I was talking, we'd put 7 down in the title. I was going to reduce it to 5 to fit it in the time, and then I went back up to 7 again, so 7 habits. Here we go, let's go. The first one is to be obsessed with customers, to be customer focused. That's what it's all about. Your customers are what's important. Now, we've learned this a few ways. One of them, we do the standard listening things where we have user voice, we have, forums and all that sort of stuff. We have customer champs. So we assign for our top customers, we assign somebody actually in the engineering team who works hand in hand with that customer, and it's kind of short circuits over standard support and things like that you have in a big company like Microsoft, and it has actually somebody on the engineering team knowing a customer personally and trying to build empathy with the individual, with an individual customer, so they can keep that empathy in the team and they don't feel disconnected from the customers, which in a big company like Microsoft, it's very easy to do. And then we have in-product feedback as well. If you ever get a pop-up, that says, would you like to send this, we've detected an error, would you like to send this back? Please say yes. It makes Christmas for one of the engineers, because all of a sudden they get a core dump, a memory dump and some stack trace and things, and they can actually go fix a problem that they might be seeing pop up in telemetry, and they haven't been able to get the right stack trace yet to be able to figure it out. So that would be awesome if you can. But we also extend it into our definition of done. So when we started doing Agile, we had a definition of done that was things had to be potentially shippable. Now, that's cool and everything, but potentially shippable, there's a lot of wriggle room, You can forget all your accessibilities and your, all the abilities, really. You can say, oh, yeah, it's potentially shippable. And that was progress from where we were, where we didn't ship for 9 months, When we moved towards running a service and moved towards using DevOps practices, we changed our definition of done to being live in production. It has to actually be shipped before you can say it's done. It has to have customers using it. But it's not just customers using it, because if you're not looking at telemetry, if you're not looking at seeing if you've made things better or not, you could just be making it worse a lot quicker, okay? So you have to be looking at telemetry and be able to get the telemetry back to know if you've made it better or worse within that same sprint. If you can ship it 78,000 times a day, but you can only get telemetry back after 9 months, then you're not going to be able to iterate quickly and respond to what your customers need. So collect telemetry. And then finally, we talked about experiments earlier on as well. Have we made it better or worse? So you're making small changes to the system, a bit like during an eye test. Better or worse, better or worse. And that's what you're constantly doing with your system, trying to make it better, but you're not making a bet that it's going to be better. You're making a test, you're making an experiment to see, I think this will make it better, let's test that. And you see if it's made it better or worse. Sometimes it unexpectedly becomes worse. We did on a website, we put a fancy video in our acquisition pages, and we got less people signing up because we found they were spending too long watching the video. And so we changed the video to a GIF, and then we got a higher rate of acquisition through this particular page. And that was totally unexpected and totally counterintuitive, but it worked. And we were able to do that because it was an experiment we were running. It wasn't a bet that I'd stake my career on. So that's how we define done now. And we collect a lot of data. This is, I think we're about 2 petabytes of data for our system we're collecting a day, which is a lot of data, but we don't look at all that. That's useful for doing like log analytics and things. What we do is we measure the things that are important to us. You know if a team is successful by if customers are using their features, what their satisfaction with their features is, how much drop-off they get during the funnel. You know if a development team is being successful by how quickly they can build, how quickly they can deploy. How long in your organization does it take for a new hire to have code running in the hands of customers? Is that a metric you know the answer to? Is that a metric you're tracking every single month to know if you've made that better or not for your engineering team? And if you're not focusing on that, then it's going to be, how do you know if you're making it better? How do you know if you're getting quicker at deploying things into production, if you're iterating quicker? Those are the sort of key metrics that we like to look at. And then for the, this is a bad slide, the metrics we don't like to look at in red, so not very helpful for the, red, green colorblind, the gray and the gray, but never mind. Things we don't like to watch. Things like team velocity, how a team measures their velocity. I don't care how you measure your velocity. You can measure it in T-shirts, you can measure it in story points. I don't care. What I care about as a manager of teams is how much the features are getting used and how much value customers are getting out of them. Right, next one. Find something that hurts in your development process. What is your top pain right now? And just keep doing that until you get really good at it, okay? And that's a habit we learn over and over again. And then look at what the next pain point is. Find what that one is and improve it until you get good at it. Don't, fix it. Don't be, I'm going to do a 9-month campaign to completely solve this problem and eradicate it forever from mankind. Just fix it a little bit in a sprint. And then, is it better or worse? Make it better, move on. And that's key sort of habit in DevOps, really, is to just find what's painful, get good at it, move on, and find the next thing. One of the things that was painful for us was around security exploits and things. In running a live service, we need to make sure we are good at, making it secure. And so we started doing red team exercises, wargaming our security exploits. So we have a group of people who are engineers inside the company. So they have internal knowledge. They have a slightly misspent youth, and like to know how to break things and hack things. And we have them assembled into a red team periodically, and they try and attack the system. Meantime, the existing people who we all looking after our systems, we try and detect an intrusion. This is great and works as an exercise. A couple of scary things. One, the red team are allowed to do anything hackers can do, apart from take out real customer data. But they can take out our data and try and extract our own data from our system. Our red teams are constantly trying to phish us and spearfish us and do all these sorts of things, all the time. If I get emails from a particular couple of people who I happen to know are on the red team, I'm doubly suspicious of them, you know what I mean? But they're not that stupid to send them from themselves. And it's, the other thing that just gives me, I'm sort of getting goosebumps here, even wanting to say this out loud and admitting it in public. The red team, they always win, every single time, a certain way. And it's quite scary, but you've got to not be afraid of that. And go, they've got in. They know the system really, really well, even though they weren't allowed to use exploits, but they got in. How can we make sure we can detect them next time? How can we make sure we can, mitigate those and stop them from happening again? A couple of weeks we were doing a red team exercise, and I saw an email from our usual, SRE channels came in. Well, it was actually, on Teams. And I remember I looked at it, and I just sort of said to my family, okay, you should probably get the kids to bed now. I'm going to be a late night because this one sounds awful, and I'm probably going to be up all night handling PR fallout from this one because it's really, really, really bad what the blue team were saying had happened. They noticed the user account was pushing to production and things, which was a bit scary. And then sort of 2 minutes in, I pinged somebody who's one of our top security contacts and said, hey, just to let you know, I'm coming online to help out with the PR fallout from this one. And he said, oh, don't worry, it's me. It's a red team exercise. It's awesome that they found it. I'm really pleased. So, do that. So I got some sleep and I had a little bit to drink beforehand and then went to bed. Okay. The next thing we did was we used we used feature flags quite heavily because one of our biggest pain points was around iteration debt, building up these long branches and then integrating them back in again. So we switched to using feature flags, which was cool because it helped us reduce the integration debt. And a feature flag is just a fancy name for an if statement. If this feature is switched on, then go do something. Go execute a particular branch of logic in my code. And then you can make that feature toggleable. So you can enable it for a certain subset of your community. You can actually have users opt in, which we do for all UI. Any UI changes we make those opt in. And we advertise them to customers and allow them to opt out. And we don't allow new UI if more than 5% of users are opting out. Because it doesn't matter how clever you think your UI is, if people are actively opting out of it, then it's not working. UI is like a joke. If you have to explain it, then it ain't working. So go and, that's what we do with feature flags. And they're awesome and people love them. Sadly, the marketing team love them too much because it enables what's called dark launches. So you can get all your code out there, and then you can have a guy like Scott Guthrie or Satya Nadella walk up on stage and say, we've done a new feature, it's amazing, ta-da, and switch it on, and everybody's got the new feature. And they love that, and that makes great news, and gets us on Hacker News and Reddit and everything which people like. The downside of that is sometimes when you enable a feature of new for hundreds and thousands and millions of people, unexpected things can happen. And this happened in 2013, where we had live on stage, we switched the feature flag on as Scott Guthrie's walking up on stage to demo something in production and starts to demo it. And as he's demoing it on stage, it starts to fail. It was actually due to a regex, believe it or not. We always say, if you solve a problem with regex, you've now got two problems, and one less career, it turns out. But you come on stage and it started to go horribly wrong. And this turned out it was a particular problem. It was working fine in pre-production, but when we had lots of users from lots of different locales, it was causing a problem on some of the servers and making them recycle too quickly and run out of memory. So, hey-ho, lesson learned. We now don't switch feature flag on. They have to be switched on 24 hours before a major announcement, so they can have a full free busy cycle in production before it gets announced. So if you want to have a career as a burgeoning tech blogger, just go use Azure the day before like a build or a connect or a major Microsoft event and just tweet all the features you find because they're all switched on. And again, I didn't tell you that. Okay, talking about needing new careers. Next one, production first mindset. This was something a lot of you already know because you have real jobs. We didn't know when we were working in Microsoft because we were building shrink wrap services, and we had to learn how to build a service. We had to learn how to be on call. We had to learn how to deal with live site incidents. If the live site is down, everything stops. Everybody goes, fixes the live site. Everybody jumps on that call. When the live site has an issue, a bridge is automatically stood up, a conference call is automatically stood up. And in fact, Satya Nadella's voice is on a robot, and it dials the DRI, the person who's responsible for that area of the system, gets dialed in, and the person starting up the bridge, it's Satya who calls you and says, our live site is very important to us, please connect. And it's quite alarming at 4 a.m. when Satya rings you up. So we do all that. But we're very careful we plan to rotate our people who are on call, and we also plan to rotate people who are on the bridge. Because if you have a really bad outage, like we had a while ago with South Central US that went over 8 hours, and people start to get tired and punchy, and you need to have a plan in place for cycling people who are on these calls and things, and look after people's welfare. Because this is part of work now. It has to be sustainable. And that's something we just had to learn how to do. We weren't experienced in. Again, most people with real jobs know how to do this because you know how to run services. We didn't. When you do make mistakes, be transparent about them, own up to them. It's the only way to maintain trust with your customers. And one of the things we learnt was about alerting alerts had to mean something. We would often find in our post-mortems that we'd had a bunch of alerts raised for a particular issue. We just ignored them because there was so much noise there and we weren't able to listen to our system. So we now make false alerts are a bug or a defect just like every other type of issue, and we try and tone down the alerting and make it so every alert is actionable. Obviously, things like, it's a pendulum. You turn things down too far, and then you have an issue, and then you go to your post-mortem, and you see what went wrong, what alerting did we miss, what should we add, those sorts of things. So it's a constant tuning game, but alerting is key. The next thing we learnt while I'm talking about all the mistakes we've made is we talked about checklists earlier, and checklists are great, and we use checklists a lot. We originally started by using checklists for deployments as well. And so we would have this checklist that ran up, and it was great. And it would all be like execute this script, do this, do that. A checklist. There's always one or two things which you have to do. This is one here. This is an actual example. Anyone, apart from this being in PowerShell, which is obviously an issue, anybody also see what's wrong with this particular bit of PowerShell? I guess the bane of every developer's life when using Microsoft Office products. Smart quotes. Yeah, thanks. Yes, smart quotes. Yeah, exactly. An oxymoron if ever was one. So One of our lines had smart quotes embedded in it. It's like one of a dozen steps, more than a dozen, halfway down. Nobody really noticed it. We ran it in pre-prod, and it broke pre-production for a whole day while we tried to spot it. And we were like, no, we can't do this again. Like, we have to automate everything. So now we automate, because we're deploying so many times a day, we have to automate that happening, because it's something we want to get good at. And so we make that investment. So now we don't allow one-time commands being ran. Everything we need to execute in production gets checked in, and then runs through what we call our safe deployment practices. So runs through our environments and goes out into production. So, and then we have we use like canary builds. So we have a ring deployment. So you wanna when you break things, which you will inevitably do, you want to kind of minimize the blast radius of that. So we're lucky that we have a lot of internal users of our own product. So we ship it to them first before we then ship it to people who are, paying real money rather than just Microsoft internal money. And we have sort of 5 rings of exposure. The first one being internal users. Then we go to it's classic test stuff, smallest external data center, smallest data center with real people, so we can make sure that works okay. Then we go to our biggest, because quite often, the smallest, because you want a quick turnaround, is this going to work or not? The largest data center, because you want, quite often, a lot of the problems only happen when you're at massive scale. And then we start to go for the ones with greatest latency, so the international data centers from where we're deploying, and then finally everything else. So that's kind of how we stage our deployments. And the number of users that we're deploying to is sort of exponentially increases as we go along that. People also use, we currently do progressive exposure by deployment to rings, so deployment to actual data centers. A lot of people who are a bit more sophisticated in where we want to go is to get to the point where we're able to, crank up the actual percentage of users we're running on versions of software and things like that. That's not how we run today, but we'd like to get there. Again, it's about making a small improvement and getting there. Microsoft don't have all the answers by any means, and this is just where we are. So that was a summary of our life site culture. Right, team autonomy. This is a key one. This one comes from Agile, which is a lesson we learned there. But basically, there's this constant tension between speed and reliability, it feels like in software engineering, between being able to do things quickly or being able to have control. And as software engineers, we need to live on that. We need to skirt as close to that border as possible. We need to be living on the edge of chaos, as like Ken Schraber and people like that would say. We're constantly trying to be as innovative as possible while having the right amount of control. So within our team, we base things a lot. A lot of how we think about autonomy and having autonomy in our teams was driven by this Dan Pink's book, Drive. If you haven't got it, definitely read it. Or if you don't want to read it, watch the YouTube video, the 5-minute version of his TED Talk. It's great, and then it saves you reading the book, but it's a really good book as well. So we have all these areas where we want to have autonomy, but we have to have some alignment, because if you don't have any alignment at all, you can have a bit of a train wreck. So we have autonomy over how teams plan and how they actually deliver. So what they do and how they do it are completely up to the team. But then we have some alignments in terms of taxonomy and how the organization is structured across the organization to make it easy for somebody to move from one part of the org to the other and to minimize that amount of time it takes for a new engineer to spin up in your org. So how our organization is structured, I didn't build this slide, by the way, as you can tell. So we used to have program management, which is where I sit, because I've got a blue hoodie on. And then dev and testing is how it used to be. We merged the dev and test disciplines into one called engineering. So you're responsible for your code that ships in production. And then we also have a group of specialist SREs who are awesome at being able to help us make sure everything's running properly. And we pull everybody together into a feature team. And a single feature team is then responsible for delivering the value into that customer. For Azure DevOps, there are about 45 feature teams right now running. So we have lots of feature teams that all run. And a feature team is like a 2-pizza team, like a dozen people sort of thing, cross-discipline, but running one team, owning an area. We try and physically co-locate them just because to have a combined sense of ownership. We're lucky enough to have big offices and things that we can do this in, which is great. But we find that the further somebody is from you in the org chart or geographically, then the more stupid they are. That's just like a fact of life. And so we try and physically co-locate everybody so they feel that they own that feature, they own that product, they are a group, they are a team. Sometimes we'll change the what they work on, but we won't change the team. We'll keep the team static for like 24 months, 10 or 18 months I've got there. But yeah, around about 2 years is what we aim for. Something we do in my team, which nobody else in Microsoft does right now, is we actually allow the engineers and SREs in the team to pick which team they work on. And I, as a manager, have to like kind of pitch my team and why you should come work on it, why it's the most important thing in Microsoft to work on. It's crazy and surprisingly works. It gives people the feeling of, they are choosing what they work on. Typically, you don't get, 100% of people don't choose to leave a team. If they do, then that's usually a sign we need new leadership on that team. But it gives people the sense of being able to move between them. Typically less than 20% do, and of those, around about 90% we're able to give them their first choice. We want to allow career growth within our team. I want you to be able to have a successful career and grow and stay working for me. I don't want the way you grow to be to leave my team or to worse, to leave the company. So I need to be able to provide opportunities for you to grow within the team. And then we try and concatenate some of our the agile, things you do, like sprint demos and stuff. We try and put them into mails and all that sort of thing. So benefits: you get lots of happy people with sticky notes, apparently. Okay, I'm going to whip through these two now. Shift left, so bringing the quality early in your process. We sort of moved how we did our unit testing. We went from alongside integration tests for a lot more unit tests. We knew we wanted to do this, but we knew it was going to take us a long time. So we started, and we made small amount of progress. Each one of these bar charts you can see is actually 3 weeks is a sprint. It took us 2.5 years to get where we needed to get to, but we did it a baby step at a time. So that was an example there of sort of how we were shifting left over time. And we also do a lot more stuff in our pull requests now. So we do a lot of pre-merge validation. So we don't break the build anymore, but we quite often break the build of a pull request, and that's great because that doesn't affect anybody, and it's the system is checking that for you. The final thing we kind of learned technically, when I started the company, you used to get given a honking big desktop tower machine and a laptop, and you used to like put a bunch of VMs on your desk machine. We moved those VMs slowly into the cloud. And we use a thing called DevTest Labs, which allows you to do that and switch the machines off so we don't have huge Azure bills, which is cool. We build to both cloud and on-prem. We ship the same code that ships both places. If we were shipping 100% to the cloud, we'd be all about PaaS because it's a lot higher compute density. But as we're shipping both the cloud and on-prem, it kind of limits some of our architecture choices. So this is kind of how we architect it. We're not all containerized and Kubernetes'd up yet, though that's the way we're moving. We're moving more and more to container-based microservices. But we have a 20-year-old product that we're bringing along with us. So, we kind of split it out and gradually moving there. And we're not ripping everything into containers on, overnight. We're doing it gradually and moving into that direction. The reason why we're going to containers, as I say, because it gives us the ability to ship to both cloud and on-prem, but gives us the higher compute density that we're after. And then my final thing to leave you with is, you see all these things, you come to DevOps Days and it's amazing. You see all these people doing amazing stuff like the chaos engineering that Netflix do, or some of the amazing retrospective stuff. And wow, that's awesome. Like, that could never work in my company, okay? Just start. Just make some progress. Like, fix a little bit. We found, Nicole Ferguson had in the DORA State of DevOps report, this excellent insight around progress following a J-curve, which is exactly how we found our stuff worked. We had a little bit of automation. We thought, yeah, this is amazing. And then we kind of uncovered this massive amount of debt that we didn't really know about. And then, we now became consciously incompetent is another way of thinking about it, and then we sort of moved up this curve, and we got to the point now where we feel like we're delivering quite quickly and quite rapidly. That's unusual, so be prepared for that when you start your transformation, that you're going to have, it's going to early success, a bit of a dip, and then you've got to rise out of it again. And then, finally, as I say, just get started. Just do a little bit to improve your process. What one thing can I take away from today and tomorrow that I can take back to my team, improve a little bit and make my team a little bit better, and then we'll try something else and try and fix the next one. So thank you very much for your time. DevOps isn't magic, but hopefully you'll find something in the next 2 days that you can take back. Thank you.